believe is one of the most impactful civil rights police excessive use of force cases in the history of America. We want the world to know that these are not isolated issues. That in fact George Floyd and Dante Wright is the face of hundreds of murders here in the state of Minnesota that have been covered up for many years, and the officers have walked free.
Let's get him an additional witness.
You're under the state of Minnesota arrest.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, are you ready to proceed? Call your first witness.
Did you execute a traffic stop of a red Ford Explorer?
Yes, I did.
And did you approach the passenger side?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe just very briefly the initial interaction that you had with the passenger of that vehicle?
Go ahead and undo your seatbelt. Please help yourself. I don't plan on shooting you. I'm just saying, let's take your time. Okay, relax. Just undo your seatbelt. Let her take care of her guy. Just keep your hands up where I can see him. Hey! Let me. Keep your hands where I can see him.
I had to wake him up. He woke up the second time I said Floyd there. The police is here. It's about to turn down the bill wasn't real. I kept saying, baby, get up. The police was out, so he looked, and we looked to the right, and he had the police. He tapped on the with a flashlight. And I'm like, Jordan, so we turned back around again. He's like, what? And I was like, baby, that's the police. Open the door, roll down the window, whatever he told me to do. So he looked back, and he instantly, when he seen the man had the gun at the window when we looked back to him. So he instantly grabbed the wheel, and he was like, please don't kill me, please don't shoot me, what did I do? Just tell me what I did, please don't kill me, please don't shoot me. And I'm like, baby, it's not, you said explain, I'm trying to explain what state he's in, sir.
During the course of the restraint of Mr. Floyd, do you continue to see Mr. Floyd actively resist to some degree?
Yes, he was struggling.
You brought Mr. Floyd to the ground. Are you saying you don't consider that to be a use of force?
Up to that point, it was still the use of force, yes.
Once Mr. Floyd is on the ground, in your opinion, does there continue to be some level of resistance by Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
How would you describe that?
Active resistance, he was still struggling against the efforts of the officers. And I saw on one of the body cam videos that Mr. Floyd appeared to kick at Officer Lane.
At some point, the defendant is on top of him. Is that right?
I think he had his knee on him. I'm not sure if I would describe that as being on top of him.
All right. And you see that the defendant has his knee on top of Mr. Floyd. Is that correct?
I see his knee in the vicinity of the upper back and neck area.
Is it on the top or the bottom of Mr. Floyd?
It's on his back. Top being top of the head, or
You tell me, is it on the top, the bottom, the side? Where is his knee?
I see his knee on the upper spine and neck area.
Is the upper spine then on the top?
Okay, we need to use top.
Okay, you would agree with me then?
Yes.
Okay. And so the defendant is on top of Mr. Floyd.
His knee is on top of his.
Can you just briefly overview your opinions in this particular case?
I felt that Derek Chauvin was justified and was acting with objective reasonableness, following Minneapolis Police Department policy and current standards of law enforcement, and his interactions with Mr. Floyd.
All right, folks, a lot happened today. The defense started their case. The state rested. You also have everything happening outside of the courthouse. Who had a better day, prosecution or defense? Let's bring back in our think tank. Let's go backwards. We'll begin with Ann Bremner tonight. Who had a better day, prosecution or defense?
Well, I think the prosecution did the cross-examination of that expert, but I think the defense got some really important things out, and I think they're subtle, I think, to a lot of folks that are watching the trial. But you had talked about this on the air, Vinny. Every murder case, when we were prosecutors, we relied on the medical examiner for cause of death. The medical examiner in this case is not relied on by the prosecution. he's relied on by the defense. And basically saying, if he'd been found alone in a room, I could see this could be an unfortunate death from overdose. This is his own testimony. This was not asphyxia. And then we had really important testimony that I think people would say, well, how can you bring in the past of George Floyd and not Chauvin? Well, here's why. 2019, as we know, he had an incident with the police where he ingested drugs and had a heart issue where his systolic blood pressure was over 200. So you say this is almost identical to the medical issue in this case because he had the issue with his heart, the arteriosclerotic disease, the narrowing of the arteries, 70 to 90% may become fully occluded. That could be subject to further medical examiner. So he's put in that testimony today that wraps that up and says, see, this exact same thing happened. And that's
Okay,
very
buddy?
important to his defense
Yeah.
on causation.
All right, Michael Stone,
Distraction.
prosecution or defense today?
I think the prosecution had the better day, Benny. What we saw was the cross-examination of this expert witness, the only person who's willing to testify for Derek Chauvin that he was using reasonable force as someone who was paid to do so. Whereas the defense, if you look back at the prosecution, they were able to, one, I think, undermine the credibility and believability of this particular expert. He undermined himself a little bit by just not refusing to concede to basic facts. And they were able to sort of undermine some of his credibility. And I think this was the key part that the defense really needed more than anything else to show that what he was doing didn't amount to an assault because it was justified. And I think that was